phenomenal.
Awesome.
For James Franklin and the Nittany Lions. And I think, Sunday, if you had a chance to check out the Big Ten Network, it was Penn State Day. And the one thing I caught, I had a very full Sunday schedule, but I caught the first 3 matches of the Penn State-Iowa dual meet from this past season with the Big Ten coverage that started at 6, and then I had to leave because I was going horseback riding in the morning.
Nice.
Caught a little bit of different things throughout the day at night, but the thing that I was actually really happy because I don't think I had ever seen it before was the I don't even know what you would call, but a bunch of interviews and stuff with the players from the 86 team. But it went back and kind of talked about the 84 and 85 seasons, 84 and the disappointment there. And, Trey Bowers, like, yeah, Joe, when he's recruiting me, is telling me, you're going to play for a national championship at some point throughout your career. That's what we target. Didn't guarantee it, but said that's what we expect. And he said, and then I'm sitting here and I'm watching this 84 season play out, and it's like, I don't know about that, man. But then obviously have a great 85 season, but then the Orange Bowl doesn't go as desired, and then obviously 86 ends up being one of the most special seasons, and the Fiesta Bowl arguably still the most I don't know how arguable it would be from a Penn State perspective, most important game in Penn State history, but it is one of the most important and influential games in the history of college football. Because of the fact that thing came together the way it did with 2 independents meeting in the Fiesta Bowl, and obviously elevated the Fiesta Bowl, but also I think the way in which college football viewed the potential for a national championship game, and I think at least contributed to the eventual college football playoff coming into being. But
you could draw a straight connection between the massive amount of money the Big Ten is about to reap in its new media rights deal, and the decision to move that game into Friday night prime time and prove once and for all that big time college football was like a viable national television product. Because if that would have been a total dud, if the network execs would have been tearing their clothes and screaming to the heavens that they preempted Miami Vice, which was killing it for ABC, I guess it was, right? At the time, who knows how long it happens again before TV execs are willing to entertain the viability of college football as a national TV product, because the conventional wisdom going into that was NFL's a national product, college is regional.
Yeah, NBC, I think it was. Right?
I don't know. I was 5.
So, still. Point still well taken. But so that watching that retrospective and listening to the players talk about kind of how that thing came together, and of course, the way my mind works is the potential, right, for these next couple of seasons.
Oh, man.
To because you're coming off a couple of disappointing seasons. 83 disappointing in a different way, but 84 really was just a disaster of a season,
because they kind of put it together by the end of the 83 season, right?
But the thing is,
correct. Like that terrible loss to Nebraska to start the season.
You had a good feeling going into 84, but and again, we'll see how everything plays out. I'm not saying there's a direct comparison yet, but I'm also not saying there's not. So, let me just, for the sake of the discussion, point out where I think the potential is there, at least for
Do it. We're smoking hopium on the show today. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Hey, it's July and optimism reigns supreme. Heck, 100%. I even think the Steelers could get to the playoffs right now. I have myself convinced that is a possibility. Not really completely convinced, but I'm kind of trying to get there.
If we don't bring our special guests in on Thursday, that's what we'll do. Let's look at the Eagles and Steelers schedule, and we'll talk about it. Because I might be buying on the Steelers as well.
And it's one of those things where it just, as always, right? It's a couple of things. Is the season will hinge on it, and if they go the right way, you're golden. If they go the wrong way, you're in really bad shape.
And if you got a nice draft pick
with a mixture, yes, then you end up, at least in the hunt and see how it all plays out. But I'm listening to the discussion, and there's some dissimilarities also in that pretty definitively, I would say definitively right now, we know Sean Clifford is the starting quarterback this year. Obviously going into that 85, and then even more so really going into the 86 season, you had the Kisner-Schaefer battle, and public sentiment was completely behind Matt Kisner, and obviously it played out pretty well with Schaefer ultimately getting the job. But that 84 team, for as bad as that season was with the 5 losses, Penn State was in every game. I mean, it was like you could go back and look at a play or two in each of those games, and it's like, man, they were this close to being really, really good, and having a successful, by just about any measure, a successful season. But didn't make the plays. And again, at the end of the day, nobody's going to sit there and argue that, a 5-loss season by Penn State standards is a good season in any way. But nobody felt that there was a lack of talent on the roster going into the 85 season. Now, nobody was expecting that 85 season to play out the way it did. I mean, nobody, I don't even think the most optimistic of Penn State fans were like, oh, yeah, we'll probably be playing for the opportunity to win a national title at the end of the season.
Yeah, so for the non-historians in the audience, undefeated regular season, Penn State loses to Oklahoma, coached by Barry Switzer, the Brian Bosworth year in the Orange Bowl. So their only loss was in the national title game.
And that game, I had kind of forgotten that they were pointing out a couple of the headlines from newspapers after that Orange Bowl that in more so in the southern part of the country, but it's like, Penn State exposed as frauds. And really, outside of the 2 big passes to Keith Jackson in that game, I mean, it was a very competitive game. It wasn't as though Penn State got blown off the field by Oklahoma. There were 2 really big plays, and
that was a good team. That's a really good Oklahoma team.
Oh, it was
a ton of talent.
A terrific Oklahoma team. And Penn State's offense for sure struggled, as, by the way, it did against Miami, which was obviously an outstanding team the following season.
For sure. Was Galen Hall the OC in Oklahoma for that game?
I think
that he was.
Yeah. And I think that, the thing about that game, the Oklahoma game, now I'm talking about that with the Orange Bowl at the end of the 85 season, was that the one of the key plays in that game was early in the first half, and now I'm forgetting, I think it was Ray Isom, right, that was injured in that got injured early in that game. And
I think that's right.
I'm not even sure I remembered it or knew at the time. I'm guessing I probably did at the time, but I had completely forgotten. I remembered the injury, but I'd forgotten. Like, Isom goes out of the game, and the very next play, Oklahoma hits a play down the middle for. I forget if it was for a touchdown or for a huge yardage.
Yeah,
one of the two, and it
set
up
a game changer,
a
though,
touchdown,
for sure,
no doubt. But so that 84 team, again, was considered to be talented and had high hopes going into that season. And then, again, they lose
Sounds
several
familiar.
tough games.
Yeah.
And the expectations are virtually nil for the 85 season. I'm overstating that a bit, but I mean, certainly nobody expecting Penn State to be playing Oklahoma for the national title in the Orange Bowl at the end of that season.
A big addition for the 85 team, the infusion of talent from an uber skilled freshman running back
for sure. And he has talked to a good bit in that piece, Blair Thomas, in the retrospective of that 86 team and the way that all kind of evolved. And then again, quarterback controversy aside, you did have a veteran quarterback who took more than his fair share of criticism. Again, he was criticized to the point that they were doing all kinds of, I think it was the Harrisburg Patriot News that ran the statewide poll, and the fans fairly overwhelmingly chose Kisner, which of course is probably part of why Joe Paterno went with John Schaefer,
fueling a lifelong love affair between the Patriot News and Joe Paterno.
Yes.
Yeah, they were big fans of one another.
The fans and or the media to determine who he was going to name as the starter. And
I do point this out to folks, Ironhead. To this point in history, Penn State has never won an undisputed national championship without being led by a quarterback from Ohio wearing number 14. I'm just saying. Just saying. It's these are the facts, folks.
Fair enough. So we'll see what ends
do
up.
with it what you will.
what ends up happening here with the upcoming season. But I do think so. There was a lot of the offseason between 84 and 85, everybody talks about as being obviously critical in terms of getting everybody on board and getting everybody reacquainted with the work ethic to get to that next level.
You think back in the 80s when there were like basically no rails on how hard you could work guys in practice, do you think that was a fun offseason?
Yeah, in listening to those guys talk, it sure sounded like a blast. But listen, so I think that when you look at this year's team going into the season, I don't think there's anybody anywhere who doesn't think that this team doesn't have a lot of talent on it, right? I mean, you look at the last couple of recruiting classes, we can argue about development, key spots, whatever, but it is a talented roster. There is at least highly touted talent coming out of high school. And listen, I think what we've seen production-wise from a lot of the players that do return as upperclassmen, again, there's plenty of talent on this roster.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not it all comes together and we get anything like that 85 or then 86 season remains to be seen. But I do think there are some similarities there in terms of veteran leadership. Again, Sean Clifford, there are not many that I know he's named to the Davey O'Brien watch list.
There you go.
At the start of the season.
An exclusive club that includes every returning starting quarterback in Division I.
But Sean Clifford is not generally looked at as I think he's looked at as a solid quarterback. I mean, I don't think he's, people are thinking he's a trash quarterback, but you're not going into this season with a ton of expectations that this guy is going to be in contention for a Heisman Trophy or anything like that.
No, right? I think healthy, he's a top 6 quarterback in the conference.
Yeah,
which is enough to win with if you put talent around a guy like that.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a couple of different articles that are ranking the quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and 4 or 5 seems to be where they're putting Clifford somewhere in that area. I think, and I think that's going into the season about right when you look at where everybody else is and some of the other kids coming back. But that being said, I also don't think it's a huge stretch to think that Sean Clifford, working with the same offensive coordinator for a second season, and having gone through all he's gone through, can take a jump and maybe even a leap this year and become one of those elite quarterbacks. And I'm talking in college football. I'm not even trying to go down the NFL route and where he might project it at the next level. But I'm talking about his production as a college quarterback, I think could, and I don't think it's like a huge reach, could be very high in the upcoming season.
Can I just point something out in Sean's defense? I really think this is an important point to drive home. We've been watching Penn State football for a long, long time, and the one thing that you could almost always set your watch to was a reliable ground game. Now, sometimes it was superlative. You know, you get a Kurt Warner or a Blair Thomas or John Carter, Curtis Enos. You can name all these guys who we've had the pleasure of being able to watch, and Penn State had one of the best rushing attacks in the country. But typically, even if you had a less heralded guy, one of my favorites, Rodney Kinlaw, you still got it done on the ground. Penn State's rushing offense last year was historically bad. It was terrible. I went back and I looked through 25 plus seasons of Penn State football, and the only 2 seasons of this century or the late 20th century you can compare it to are 2003-04, which if you know anything about Penn State history is not a category you want to be included in.
For sure.
And then 2014-15, when you're talking about 65 scholarship players on the roster. So big asterisks on the 14-15 and a smaller asterisk, which is they tried, but they stunk. When you have a full roster of highly regarded guys, you do not want to be in the conversation with either of those 2-year periods of Penn State football. That was the rushing attack. I mean, for whatever you can say about pass protection, when the opposing defenses by mid-season have figured out that this is a quarterback who is playing lame and they are zero. I am talking about cannot move the ball on the Villanova Wildcats. Zero chance there's going to be any threat from the run game. Man, you got to be way, way better than a top 4 or 5 quarterback in the conference, which is usually a nice thing to have to get anything going.
No, there's no question. And it wasn't, yes, I mean, it was a lack of production overall, but it was even more so, right? Because you can have that lack of production, but man, when it counts most, right? It's, I mean, and that was kind of John Schaefer, right? Like the overall numbers might not have stood out to you, but man, when Penn State needed him that season to make a completion and to deliver the ball, he did. And that was the thing.
That Orange Bowl we talked about was his only loss in his whole career, high school and college.
How many times did Penn State last year have that 3rd and short and not
get it? I mean, unbelievable.
I mean, it was every maybe overstating very slightly, but it was every freaking time.
Now,
like
for years,
Ironhead yard when you need it. And
unlike you, for years, Goon and I have had to watch the Flyers on the power play, so I was familiar with the sense of futility that you came over you when Penn State lined up 3rd, 4th, and short. But that was it. You just knew. You're like, there's no way. There's no way. And you could tell, you could sense it in the body language of the opposing defense. They knew it too. Yeah. They're like, we got these guys dead to rights.
Yeah. And so that obviously,
like I said, Villanova was blowing up our short yardage plays.
But that offseason between 84 and 85, and again, I'm not going to get carried away here. It just, I saw that and I loved it.
No, you're firing me up.
And I'm just
get carried away
looking at these 2 teams. But one of the things they really did do is, listen, let's get back. We got to refocus on making the plays when we need to, on, making sure we get the stops when we need to, and just, again, re-examining all elements of the program. And they all kind of came together and moved the thing forward, obviously, in a big way in 85. And I think James Franklin and this staff, right? I am really excited. I really am excited to see what Manny Diaz does with this already really good defense, right? Like it feels like that defense could become something really special. And listen, they have to have a couple of young guys really step up, and that's always a little dicey when you're trying to project. But if that linebacking core, and I think with Diaz in charge, that linebacking core is going to develop big time quickly. I think everything else is in place if this team can stay healthy to become, again, a really good defense. And then, it is ultimately going to come back, as it always seems to these days, to the offensive line and what kind of production and consistency they can get from that group. And I don't know. I mean, we've had that discussion, over and over, and I was really high on it going into last year. And I'm not going to pin all of the problems last year on the offensive line, but there's no question when they needed the tough yards in the tough games, they did not get them. And that has to change if Penn State is going to take that next step forward.
By the way, we
have to get those tough yards against a lousy Illinois team when you need them.
100%.
At the very
you got to be able to move a guy
season.
off the line of scrimmage. 100%. And we got a question from one of the listeners about, is there an argument to be made for the OL development being held back by sticking so stubbornly to the RPO versus installing a pro set, which again, if you look at the majority, well, I don't want to say the majority, about 50-50, the quarterback room is split between guys who are a little bit more dual threat run pass, because I think Christian Veilleux showed a lot of that. Certainly Bo Prabula fits into that category. And then if you look at Drew Aller and you look at Sean Clifford, like those guys can move. And Mike the Mailman and I have been beating this drum for 3 years with Clifford. Just because he can run doesn't mean that's the most effective way to use him as a quarterback. You would much rather see him as really more like an Aaron Rodgers who has played like a traditional drop back passer and then can kill an opposing defense because of his mobility than to play him like he's Trace McSorley. I really have. I haven't moved off that in 3 years, but you know what? Neither has the offensive play calling. So I guess the answer to the question is that the RPO is not going to be stripped out of this offense. If anything, it looks like Yurcich is going to double down on it. I'll throw a quick plug to my buddies over at For the Bloggy. If you go to their site, forthebloggy.com, you check them out on YouTube. They just started their film study videos back up for the offseason. And Coach Caduti did a good breakdown on what Sean did well and where he needs to work in the RPO in the Yurcich scheme. So again, I kind of am sympathetic to the viewpoint that maybe that would be a move that would help the offensive line development. But, I think that's something that's going to remain theoretical.
Yeah, although I will say, I think even within the RPO though, right? Like you can use Clifford differently and allow him to not take as many hits over the course of a game. And listen, but you have to get production from the run game. Like the RPO is only effective if the R is a legitimate O.
Right. I can't. Yeah. I mean, you can't average 3 yards a carry for the season and have an effective offense. You just can't.
It can't be like a very small R, a huge P, and then a little. I mean, it just it doesn't work that way. So
yes,
you need to have that legitimate threat. But
by the way, our young tight ends need to get better at blocking. I love how enthusiastic they have been since day one. Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, all of those guys have looked to me like they are more psychologically adapted to being blockers than Mike Gesicki or Pat Freiermuth were. But it looked to me like whatever Kirk Shiraka was asking them to do was pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and they excelled at it. And then when kind of their responsibilities changed, when Mike Yurcich came in, there was a drop-off. And I mean, I don't know. This is one of my like college football cliches that I really, really buy into, Ironhead. I 100% believe that the sophomore slump is real. I think if you come in and you are super talented and you get to play as a freshman, there are just some things that are running on like adrenaline and talent. And then as that starts to wear down and opposing coaches start to get tape on you and you start to feel more
that's
pressure.
A big part of it.
All of those things come into play. And so I think a lot of guys, they have a great first year and then they hit some speed bumps in year 2, and then they start to figure it out as they mature and they develop as players. But I think there was a big-time sophomore slump effect going on in the tight end room last year.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think it's across the board in sports, and I think that's a big part of it. And it's the same thing even in the NFL, where you can have guys that come in and make that big splash early, and then a lot of times you'll hear, people will be like, "Oh man, why did that guy regress?" Well, he didn't regress. Other teams are like, if you come in and make a splash throughout this offseason, right? The other coaches who are pretty good in this league are looking at the tape and saying, oh, that guy is really good. Let's scheme a little bit and figure out how we can take him out of his game. And then, again, it's up to the player and your coaching staff to then make the adjustments to the adjustments, and the chess game is ongoing. But
yeah,
I think it's much more so that other teams adjust to what you did in that season than necessarily you're taking a step back or you're getting caught up in your own headlines. And I'm not saying, some of that may apply in some cases, but I think it's much more that, other teams now know what you're capable of doing and are going to adjust and see. They'll look back and see the teams that had some success defensively. What were they doing against you last season? And we'll apply that this year.
And don't forget, those guys to come into the COVID-19 situation in 2020. Now, Brenton Strange was a redshirt, so he had already had a year in the program. Theo Johnson was a true freshman. Both of them, I think, were pressed into more playing time than the coaches probably would have liked in 2020 as freshmen.
Yeah.
And they both rose to the occasion. They flourished. But still, young guys who had a lot put on them. And, in Theo Johnson's case, this is his second offensive system in his first 2 years. At Brenton Strange, it was his third in 3, right? Like, this is going to be something new for both of these guys, getting to play in the same system in consecutive years. So one of the areas where I am actually pretty bullish on an opportunity to make a leap off production in 2021 is with the tight ends, because we've already seen them do it. We know the talent is there.
Yeah, and I think, again, if you want to look at this upcoming season optimistically, I think there is plenty of reason for hope there. Obviously, Singleton gives you a big boost in terms of talent in the backfield.
And Katron Allen, too.
And,
don't be shocked if both of those guys shoot up and start getting a lot of snaps.
Yeah, and I think that is the other thing that has changed. And obviously, Blair Thomas did make an impact in that 86 team. But even Paterno toward the end, and certainly James Franklin, as all coaches are now, if you are a freshman and you're ready to go, like, nobody's sitting there saying, oh, we got to be beholden to the senior here, and he's put in his dues. It is too much about for the coaches and for the program. I mean, we got to get the best team out there, and that means you have the competition in the preseason, and you let the cards fall where they may in terms of production. But I also think the one thing that Penn State has been really good at under Franklin, well, one of the things that they've been really good at is building depth in that running back room and in the backfield. And you don't want to have in today's game, if you can avoid it, you don't want to have a guy that is touching the ball 25 to 30 times a game. And there may be exceptions here and there to that general rule, but you want to have at least a couple of guys that are impactful and that you can rotate in and out.
And if they're looking at the league, they don't want it either.
Well, probably. And if it's a change of pace too, right? It's even a better deal. If the one is your speedster and the other's a power back, or even if it's just subtle little differences in what they give you in terms of moves and how they hit the line of scrimmage and all of that, again, it gives defenses something else to worry about and to have to prepare for. So, I do think there's some it was just so fun watching that 86 and listening to those players reflect back on what that team season game against Miami meant, even now later in their lives. I mean, Shane Conlon talked about, he said it was no question the biggest game I ever played in, and I played in Super Bowls for crying out loud. But that game, because of what it meant to everybody, because of the stage, because of the hype leading up to it, all of it, and you just saw the emotions on that field after Giftopoulos makes the interception that wraps that game up, and you see the hugs and the tears that are flowing throughout. And I mean, I do think even now when you think back on it, it was just such an unbelievably memorable moment. Game and season. Again, not just for sure in Penn State history, but really in college football history. It is just one of those games that will forever be talked about as long as there's college football. It just will. Mm-hmm. It'll be up there with the Texas USC. I mean, there's a handful of games that are, you can argue, are better, more impactful, whatever, but it is up there. For sure on the short list of games that not just were great in terms of keeping viewership and interest, but having long-term impact on the game. And, turning back to this season again, we talked a lot last year. I talked a lot about momentum and how that can swing so quickly in sports and how important it is. And I really thought the momentum Penn State established early last year with the win over Wisconsin and then the win over Auburn, just not so much that was a great victory in terms of beating a great team or anything like that, but it just felt like, again, that momentum that Penn State had in the offseason was carrying through, and then the injury to Clifford and everything changes at Iowa. And
PJ Mustipher, too. Man, obviously people fixate, and not without reason, on the injury to Sean Clifford. Losing PJ Mustipher out of the middle of last year's defense, plus the leadership and everything else, but just the on-field, that guy was turning into a monster. He was going to be a top 3 round, probably top 2 round pick, the way he was playing.
Yep.
And, man, I think a lot of people probably, in everything that happened around that Iowa game, underrate how bad a loss it was for Penn State to have Mustipher go down in that game. And so to have them both in the same game.
But you go into this season, both right now have even greater appreciation for what this season means and what the game means to them and all of that. I don't know.
I feel like now potentially, too, as a result of the Mustipher injury, you saw some guys like Devon Lees get in and get to play a little bit more than he probably would have. So now you have the benefit of having built some depth that wasn't there last year. I do think depth on the defensive line is a potential strength.
Yeah, I think it has a chance to be a critical element of success in the upcoming season.
And some of that is because of the guys who were pressed into service in lieu of Mustipher eating up a lot of snaps.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, one of the and it's a nice issue to have, but one of the issues that the coaching staff is going to have is how to handle that secondary and getting the guys. That is a loaded secondary. When you talk about talent, that is one area of the field where talent is not a concern. And again, it's a nice problem, but it's still a problem in figuring out, how to most effectively use all of the talent that you have. There's
probably 5.5 starters for 4 spots.
Yeah. Yep. And I think you're pretty comfortable going at least 2 deep at all of those spots right now in the secondary. I mean, there's not a huge drop off, I think, with any of those. And I think at a couple of spots, at least from what we're hearing with some of the young kids, that you're pretty confident and comfortable 3 deep, which is a pretty nice position to be in at any spot on a football field at any level of the game right now. So,
I mean, you're deeper just from by virtue of Marquise Wilson going back to the defensive side of the ball full time. I mean, I really liked the way he was developing at the end of the 2019 season. And then, again, like COVID and chaos, and they try him as a two-way player last year, and that seems to have caused regression for him, both as a receiver and a defensive back. But it's there's a lot of good stuff going on there. And you talked about maybe some questions around the linebacking core. I think the number of these like striker position, that's a couple years ago, the trendy word was star. Now it's the striker, but you know what I'm talking about. And that fits well with what Manny Diaz likes to do schematically. Yep. And you've got a couple of guys like Jalen Reed is somebody who I really liked what we saw from him last year. Maybe you find a way to get him on the field by using him in that kind of tweener spot, like safety linebacker hybrid.
Well, and that is the other component to this defense is I think they are very well equipped to handle just about any scheme that an offense presents or any type of offense that they have to face. Mm-hmm. And I think they are diverse enough and can give what I'm excited about with Diaz is I think you're just going to see a ton of different looks. And I'm sorry to keep going back to that 86. It just was fascinating and fun to watch on Sunday. But one of the things that they were talking about in there, and Stan Savran was used quite a bit in it because he was doing the TV coverage that year for Penn State, and he and George Paterno were teamed together. And Stan talked about, I think it was at halftime that he and George were talking, and George is like, Vinny Testaverde has no idea what he's seen out there. Like we have him completely baffled, which they obviously did, and I think this defense, I think one of the exciting things about this upcoming season is from one play to the next, I think you can completely change what you're seeing as an offense from this Penn State defense. I think they can do a lot of different blitzes. I think as you're talking about, I think they have a lot of guys. One of the toughest things these days in football, right, is to get those matchups where you feel comfortable defensively in the passing game. And, I mean, throughout college football and the NFL, all the time, I mean, every weekend in every game, you see at some point a pass downfield, and you'll hear the analysts say, man, that's a matchup they like, a linebacker on the wide receiver or a linebacker on that tight end or a cornerback on that tight end or the running back. That linebacker has no chance. I'm telling you, with the speed that Penn State has and the different schemes that they could produce, I don't think there's a matchup issue that couldn't be. I'm not saying on an individual play you're not going to have over the course of a season some bad matchups. I'm saying I think regardless of what you see from the offense, Penn State can get comfortable with whatever scheme and personnel they have that they feel confident they do match up well with whatever the offense is doing. And that is not an easy thing to have in any defense in today's football because of, again, the way the game has evolved, and it is certainly offensively skewed from the rules to the matchups and the way everything's run.
Yeah, big time.
By design. That's what football wanted, and it's what most American sports now are trying to do.
Stick the long ball, Ironhead.
Yep, is get the offensive production up. But going back to the momentum, I think since the end of last season, right, it has been a very good offseason, with the exception, and it's grant you a big exception, with the exception of the story with the extortion case and
those poor kids. That's out. Crazy.
But it really does speak to just how dangerous this world is with the internet and all of the different social media options, and how careful you do have to be if you are in any kind of a high-profile situation. And certainly college athletes now, especially in football and basketball, I mean, you are in danger if you put yourself in a position to be extorted of being taken advantage of, and not just in a situation like this.
A lot of people are down on the younger generations. I give today's kids just an enormous amount of credit, because I know, Ironhead, I know if our generations had the same technology and problems that come with it, like, we wouldn't be here today. The whole this country would have fallen completely apart.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have just driven off the road. Like, we would have been down in the bushes, hit a couple of trees, engine block on fire. So yeah, navigating this just exceptionally more complicated world. I think I can't even imagine how I could have done it, or any of my idiot friends in college when we were 18 to 22. So the relative poise that the kids who are here now demonstrate, I mean, I give them tons of credit.
And with this particular situation, if you don't know what we're talking about, there was a story that came out. Was it over the weekend? I'm forgetting. The days keep running together.
I think it was like at the end of last week.
Yeah, okay. So, but I think since we were on the to the show on
Thursday, it was like Friday morning.
So there were Penn State football players who were being threatened by a woman that they met online, of having their pictures posted publicly if the demands weren't met. And at least early on, most of the demands were to get more pictures, right? Was kind of and then it kept evolving then to, now you have to pay money, and again,
right.
It was never. And one of the players recognized early on, man, I'm in over my, this could be bad. And I think the one got put either to James Franklin's, I don't know if it was to the social media site or something, but something got posted from one of the players.
So she responded to one of Franklin's tweets with like a lewd video. It wasn't clear to me that it was a Penn State player, but it may have been. I don't know. I did get a kick, Ironhead, out of it wasn't just Penn State. She victimized athletes in a number of different football programs. And they were it was like Penn State and Alabama and Florida State, and they're listing all the programs, and then one of them was Missouri. I was like, how did Missouri get one of these things is not like the other? How did Missouri was probably just honored to be asked, they were happy to be included in the club.
Thank you for your participation.
Yes. Thanks for paying attention to us.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But anyways, it's been with the exception of that, and it's been a pretty quiet off season, which is always good news for any program
100%
in terms of off the field incidents and anything that would bring.
Do you remember all
the
wailing and gnashing of teeth in the first year of the transfer portal when Penn State had a bunch of guys jump the portal? It was like, oh my God, the rats are fleeing the ship. And I made the point that the guys who were leaving, if you looked at it, they were players who had committed during the sanctions. And so, frankly, Penn State was in a little bit of a beggars can't be choosers situation during those recruiting cycles. And then James had a lot of success bringing in talented guys. And they were upperclassmen who were, like lower, like mid-tier FBS guys who could start or contribute to a mid-tier FBS program, who saw talented underclassmen come in who were going to take their jobs. And then this, opening was there for them to not have to miss a year and go play somewhere else. And so now what has happened since all of that has evened out? Like, Penn State had very little movement in the transfer portal this year.
And I think one of the keys, for programs to have success moving forward is going to be keeping the team that you recruit basically together. And again, I don't think you're going to lose kids here or there, and it's just the nature of the beast now. But I do think there is something to having a more veteran team that has come together and has had similar experiences. And obviously, in today's game, you're going to rely on some freshmen if you're going to have big-time success as well. But I think having, that – I think it's an overused term, but I do think that there's truth to it, that you have to have that culture that everybody is buying into. And, it can be different cultures in different locker rooms, but it has to be something where the people in your locker room are comfortable, confident with it, and you are of the belief that by doing the things that you're doing, you're going to get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Which in Penn State's case is, playing and trying to win a national title. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. You're not coming to Penn State to try to have, a 10-win season, although that's wonderful and would be welcomed. Certainly.
Yep, certainly. I'm so mentally beaten
that.
down. I'd be thrilled with a 10-win season, like just over the moon.
But you're coming here with the idea that you want to win a national title before you graduate. I mean, that's why
damn straight
you're coming to a program like Penn State.
Preach, Ironhead.
So
hopium.
I think that this team, I'm excited to see, for a bunch of different reasons, how this season plays out. And again, as we've talked about, I don't go into it, I'm speaking just for me, I don't go into it with a set number. I mean, I can tell you 6 or 7 would be very disappointing in terms of number of wins. But I don't go in, I'm not sure. Like, I think I could construct a scenario where an 8-win season, I would feel good about going into next season. Again, it would be a lot of variables in there that would have to play out for me to feel good about it. But it's more so about the feeling that this team has, in particular toward the end of this coming season, and where you feel like they're at. And I will tell you, you were talking about the tight ends and needing to block better, and I'm certainly on board with that in the upcoming season. I think this offense just has to block better, period. Offensive line, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs.
Yeah.
That has to be, to me, that needs to be the number one focus going into the upcoming season. We need to be, and when I say we, I'm saying if I'm in that Penn State locker room, I would be saying we need to be better at being the more physical team. Like that mindset has to be there. That
be aggressive.
Year, we are not going to be stopped on a 3rd and 1. I don't care if it's Ohio State. I don't care if it's Alabama. I don't care who it is. If it's 3rd and 1, we're freaking Penn State. We're getting the yard. You can do whatever. You can put 11 men in the box. We are going to get a freaking yard when we need it. And there is talent, there is skill that is required for that, but more so it is a mindset. And I compare it to, my beloved sport of wrestling, to getting an escape. And Cal talks about it all the time. And if you have a really good rider, this is not as easy as Cal and those who are elite would make it sound. But to a large degree, it is true that it does come down to your mentality. Like, I am absolutely going to get out. I don't care how good of a rider you are. When that whistle blows, I'm going to get my hips under me. I'm going to explode up out of there, and I'm going to get out.
Yeah.
Now, again, if it's Zane Rutherford on top of you, that's a wonderful game plan, and it's a great mentality to have, and it might not matter at the end of the day because Zane is that freaking good in the top position. But generally speaking, and it's
well,
the
guess
same
what,
thing.
kids? Illinois' defensive line is not to college football as Zane Rutherford is to wrestling. Like, get the freaking yard.
But I think that, it is largely just a mentality. And again, it's not erasing everything else, because yes, if the guy across, you can have that mentality, and if the guy across from you is a 340-pound elite athlete who can run a 4.740 and is, yes, I get it. The mentality can only go so far. But listen, these are Division I, big-time Power 5 football recruits. with the mentality, you ought to be able to fight through for a yard with a superstar in the making running back, or maybe even a few. So, that to me is the biggest change that needs to occur in the upcoming season to change around the results and to truly feel better about where things are. Real quick, we'll wrap up shop today, but we have not talked about the Cale Sanderson contract extension. I know not a lot of information has come out about it, but I think it's a little bigger deal than maybe what it's being played out in the press, because I don't think it was necessarily as much of a given as you would think that Cale was going to return, and not. There's just a lot of options when you have the success that Cale's had, and you have the name that he has and the brand that he has.
Right.
There are a lot of options that are not as problematic as being the head coach of a college wrestling team.
Yeah, right. Listen, it's not just he could go coach somewhere else. He could do a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, and so it is a big deal to me, because I do think that Cale is as good of a coach, period, in any sport as there is in the country.
Hard to argue.
And it's not just because of the success. Obviously, the success speaks for itself, but it's the way he manages that operation, the people he has around him, and it's not just Cale. It's that Cody and Casey are there with him.
Right.
And I think Jimmy Kennedy is a fantastic fit as well now, and I hope he's here for a long period of time, because he just has that same mentality and competitive drive and all of the right things that you want in a coach. But keeping that staff together is a huge deal. And I think as you look at this Penn State wrestling dynasty moving forward, it does give fans a large measure of confidence that things are going to continue as is, meaning lots of success off and on the mat. And again, I don't think it guarantees national titles or anything moving forward, but it certainly is going to keep you in the hunt, and certainly will make you not surprised if there are a bunch more national titles. The other thing that I'm really glad to see, because I do, just from a historical perspective, I want to see Cale chase down Dan Gable, and it's kind of like watching Tiger chase down Jack Nicklaus. Even if Tiger were to someday or had been able to someday pass Nicklaus, it's not like anybody's going to say Nicklaus wasn't really special.
Right.
Like it wouldn't diminish. And if Cale ever gets as many national championships as Gable's 15, it's not like anybody's going to say, okay, well, forget about Gable. They're both going to go down as legendary figures as is.
Sure.
If Cale never wins another national title, his stature as an elite coach and one of the all-time greats in any sport is safe. But it's fun to watch that pursuit as somebody that just loves the history of the sport.
Yeah.
And you want to see your guy do it. And the other thing that's fun, I think, for Penn State wrestling moving forward is just, again, watching how many this streak that they are on with the individual national titleists and the semifinal record and the finals record. And it's unfair to put the burden on the guys that are coming in this year and that are returning from last year, but unfair or not, it's there. And I just think it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun to watch these guys, again, continue to chase down history and to try to set new standards in the sport. And again, Penn State is going into the upcoming season going to be a prohibitive favorite to win the team title again here now in 2023. That'll be it. We'll talk some Eagles Steelers. I like that idea on Thursday. We'll look at the schedules and try to project, which is always a fool's errand. But hey, you got a couple of fools. We'll
there you go. That errand was made for us.
Exactly right. So we will do that on Thursday. Until then, be good and be